So I want to thank the CSL music team and Debbie for doing our reading this week. This is the 6th week of our 7-week series on Win the Day. Each week is an independent message, and today we're talking about wind the clock. So what does it mean to wind the clock so that you can win the day? Well, first of all, it means paying attention to the clock of your life. Are you living in the past, in the future, or in the present? And then making the most of every minute and enjoying those special moments. And finally, realizing that life goals are about your daily habits. So I'm going to talk about all of those in just a minute, but I'd just like you to imagine what would happen if you made the most of every minute and established daily habits to bring about your dreams. So the question for the week is this: what is the one choice that you can make today to wind the clock, to make the most of every moment, to be aware of the past and the future, and to know that God is always present so as to win the day? So one more time, what is the one choice that you can make today to wind the clock, to make the most of every moment, to be aware of the past and the future, and to know that God is always present so as to win the day? So each week I try to explain the title, which this week is Wind the Clock, and why Patterson used it. This week it actually has to do with a clock that greets visitors in the statuary hall of the United States Capitol. In 1837, Simon Willard, who at the time was 84 years old, made and installed a clock at the United States Capitol. It's known today as the Car of History clock. Above the clock is a sculpture created by Carlo Franzani of Plio, and it's called the Muse of History, holding a book in which she records events as they unfold. In a speech before the joint session of Congress, Pulitzer Prize winner David McCullough pointed to the clock and made this statement: "It's a clock with two hands and an old-fashioned face, the kind that shows what time it is now, what time it used to be, and what time it will become." And that's truly how we divide time, I believe, in our lives. There's the past, there's the present, and there's the future. Old-fashioned clocks remind us of that division, and we also do that with our lives. We tell stories about the past. We dream about our future, what's to come, and yet we're living in what is the now. And sometimes the important thing to remember, which I've been mentioning every week, is this: if you become paralyzed by the past and fail to bury those old dead yesterdays, or if you're crippled by the future, all of those unborn tomorrows, it becomes difficult to live in the now, in this moment. Time is a human construct, and living it one day at a time is how we win the day. In the infinite of the divine, there is no time. But we wake up with these three divisions of our life: past, present, and future. And quite often we get stuck in the hurry of the day, in the unburied yesterdays or the unknowns of the tomorrows. I love what Patterson has to say about time and about life. Time is measured in minutes. Life is measured in moments. So how do we start measuring our life in moments? By making the most of every minute and every moment. Patterson reminds us to be accurately aware of every minute, everything happening right here and now, while keeping an eye on eternity. Did you know that the Greeks had two words for time? One of them was chronos, and the other one is kairos. And it's two sides of the same coin, really. Chronos is the clock time, and it's where we get our word chronology. It's sequential, past, present, and future. It's quantitative, seconds, minutes, hours, days. And we manage Chronos time. As the saying goes, if you don't manage your calendar, it will control you. I think the far more exciting time is Kairos time. Kairos makes the most of every opportunity. It doesn't keep time as much as it makes time. Kairos is really about that sixth sense that perceives something important is happening. And it's about listening to those nudges from the divine that stop us so that we listen, so that we slow down and we bask in those holy moments of our lives. I love the way Elizabeth Browning said it. Earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries. Now, you may enjoy plucking blackberries, but the point is, how often do you recognize all the heaven around you? How often do you measure your life in moments of joy and rapture rather than in minutes where you're rushing around trying to meet a deadline or make it to an appointment? How often do we take the time to just take off our shoes and relax in the divine moment? It reminded me of that movie, Barefoot in the Park, where the guy was so busy, but he finally took off his shoes and felt the softness of the grass in the park. That was one of those Kairos moments. Sometimes we're just too busy moving from 1 minute to another minute to pause and really enjoy the moments. So I'm going to ask you right now to just pause for a moment and think of a recent event or an activity that occurred in your life that truly brought you joy. An event that touched you in the moment and you decided to breathe in what was happening right then and there. A moment that I say makes your heart smile. Did you have one? That was a Kairos moment. That's Kairos time. Patterson sums it up this way. Chronos is all about making good time. Kairos is about enjoying the journey. Kairos is about stopping to smell the roses and about noticing who you are becoming along the road of this human lifetime. If we stay stuck in the day-to-day doingness, we fail to be all we can be. So isn't it time to take off your shoes and enjoy the journey? Isn't it time to wind the clock, that less familiar clock of Kairos time? Because otherwise, life is passing you by. And I know I don't want life to pass me by. I love the section in the book where Patterson talks about aging and all of us worrying about how old we are. And we try to say that we're 50, but it's really the new 30, or 60, and that's really the new 40. And his question is, why not just own your age? Are you aging or are you living? And I think that's a huge question, because I'm proud of being 72. Each decade for me has brought me more joy and more wisdom And I believe more Kairos time because I'm learning what's really important and what I should be doing with my time. Many people define themselves by the number of years they've lived here. And while we can determine the age of the tree by the number of the rings in it, did you know that doctors have no way of determining a person's age other than their birth date? Now that should be a huge clue about whether or not we want to try to tell somebody we're 29 when we're really 39, or try to change the age that we're living. Einstein proved that time is relative. Traveling through space, we actually age less quickly. And there's a study that reminds us that old time might truly be flying by, but we can slow it down. In 1979, a Harvard professor, Ellen Langer, decided to do a study, and it's called the counterclockwise study. She wanted to see if there was any truth to that mind over matter when it came to aging. Her hypothesis was this: if we could turn back the clock psychologically, could we also turn back the clock physically? And while we know our age chronologically over time, one day at a time, psychological aging seems to vary from person to person. We see that in young children, where most girls psychologically develop quicker than young boys. So let's examine that study for a minute. First of all, she wanted to see if she could set up a place where she could actually go back 20 years. So she asked people that were in their late 70s and early 80s to participate in the study. And of course, she did all the things that are necessary. She took the markers before the study of their intellectual abilities, how quick they were, what was their medical history, what was their psychological history. And then she retrofitted an old monastery to reflect 1959, 20 years earlier. Perry Como music was on the radio. There was a black and white TV that played Ed Sullivan and the other shows of that era. She requested biographies and photos of all the people from that day and age, and she took out all the mirrors in the monastery so they couldn't see what they currently looked like. And all of the events that were happening around that time is what they discussed in their groups. And they had to talk about them as though they were current events. And anything after 1959 didn't exist in this monastery. So 1 week into the studies, 1 week, people showed measurable improvements in their physical strength, in their manual dexterity, in their taste, in their sensitivity. Their hearing and vision even improved. And for a lot of them, their fingers even got longer because the arthritis was receding. Now that's impressive. They really had stepped back in time. Some of these geriatrics who could barely walk in the front door at the beginning of the study, 1 week later, were playing touch football on the front lawn. Before and after pictures were shown to a group of people that knew nothing about the study, and they actually said that the people after looked 2 years, approximately 2 years younger than the before pictures. So what does this tell us about mind over matter? When Debbie was reading earlier, she talked about the power of suggestion and how big it was. Not only do we have the power of suggestion making us stronger in that study that she read about, but actually this study that Langer did shows us that the power of suggestion, the power of just bringing our minds back 20 years can make us feel younger. Dr. Joseph Dispenza put it this way: the brain does not know the difference between what it sees and what it remembers. The brain does not know the difference between what it sees and what it remembers. And Patterson goes one step further. The brain does not differentiate between what it sees and what it imagines. So what do you imagine about yourself? Langler's study proved what we learned in our first lesson. We can flip the script. We can stop thinking about ourselves based on the chronological number associated with our age and think of how we would like to be. If we imagine our lives to be the way they were when we were younger, do you think it might bring about changes? Let's do what Ashley Montagu says. He was a British anthropologist and said he wanted to die young at a ripe old age. So own your age, but you don't necessarily have to act your age. So winding the clock is not only about owning our age and remembering to think young. The truth is that in these human forms, we have to learn to wind both the chronos and the kairos clocks. For some of you who might have been attending the Center for Spiritual Living for a while, we used to have as our opening song one that was based on the psalm, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." And I think that that's exactly what the psalmist is trying to say. Rejoice and be glad in the present moment. Last week, you might remember that I invited you to start every day by knowing it was going to be a great day. And I love what Robert Herrick says in his poem, "Make much of time." Gather ye rosebuds while you may, old time is still a-flying. And this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. You know, also last week I said, let's all slide into that home base of our heaven-bound existence, being fully spent. And that's what we do when we take advantage of those kairos moments, of those special times. You know, I say a lot that there's no spot where God is not. And if we embrace that philosophy, then whatever is happening, we have to know that God is leading us to something good. Winding the clock recognizes every moment as a gift from God. And it's also recognizing that today might be the day when you see one of those moments worth taking off your shoes and gathering the rosebuds. So keep eating the frogs, keep flying the kites, and keep winding the clock, plodding through your present moment, putting one foot in front of the other through the minutes of time, even when you'd rather not, so that you can experience those moments when God clearly shows up for you. Those moments when your kairos time and your chronos time intersect. Patterson said this in his book: you hit your target weight one day at a time. You become debt-free $1 at a time. You get into shape one workout at a time. You get your college degree one class at a time. You win the game one practice at a time. And I would add, when your daily goals honor God so that you can embrace today, you win the day one day at a time. So wind your clock. So in summary, decide this week to wind the clock. Notice your life. Are you living in the past, the future? Are you enjoying the present? Measure your life in moments. Does your world focus on the balance of Chronos and Kairos time? Or are you too busy to take off your shoes and really live in the moment? And are you aging or are you living? And finally, realize that your life goals are about daily habits. Keep winding the clock and knowing that God is showing up. So here's your affirmation for the week. How is it I so easily and willingly make the choice today to wind the clock, to make the most of every moment, to be aware of the past and the future, and to know God is always present so as to win the day. Now go wind the clock. Your challenge this week is to make use of both your Chronos time and the Kairos time, to make certain that you're not so busy in the everyday minute to minute that you miss the moments of life. So let's pray. Taking a deep, nourishing breath. Recognizing that right where you are, God is. Allowing God to pour into you so that you can see those moments of Kairos time. Those moments when you want to just take off your shoes and feel the softness of life. What I know to be the truth is that right where we are, God is. And it's those times when we get a nudge and we stop and listen that are the moments in life that are worth living for. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this entire community. I'm grateful that I know that the God without is the God within each of us, bringing us from moment to moment in our awareness. And it's from all of that gratitude that I release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action. Because God has already called it good, already called it done. So I can just say amen, and we can affirm it together. And so it is.